Good evening, all. My name is Dr. Sushant Khurana, and I'm representing Philips today. I work with Philips as the clinical head for the sleep and respiratory care business. I welcome you all to this very interesting interactive session. I really hope all of you are doing good and keeping safe and taking good care of yourself and your loved ones. So just to give you a background, how we thought about the topic was the world around us is changing very quickly, as some of us might not have predicted. There are new ways to work, new ways to do things, new webinars that you get to attend mostly on a daily basis. And hence we thought, what kind of impact would the current COVID situation have on your practicing sleep medicine? And that is where the topic originated, and that is where we discussed and thought to have an interactive session with the person who's brought sleep to India. So let me also start by introducing our guest. I have Dr. J.C. Suri sir with me. Sir is currently the chairman of Medeor JCS Institute of Pulmonary Critical Care and Sleep Medicine in Delhi. He was formerly consultant professor and head of the department Pulmonary Critical Care and Sleep Medicine in Mahavir Medical College in Safdarjung Hospital, Delhi. He's the former president and the chairman for Indian Sleep Disorder Association. Sir has also been the vice president for Asian Society of Sleep Medicine. I can actually spend 10-15 minutes just introducing him. He's such a huge figure and such a fatherly figure for sleep medicine in India. So without further ado, I would welcome Dr. J.C. Suri sir on the behalf of the entire team. Good evening, sir.
Thank you, Sushant, for a very nice introduction. And I hope you are all very safe and doing well. And same is true for the audience. We have, so with us, I hope we have some kind of interactive session, a good session, and hope we could exchange something, and I'll be able to contribute something good for them.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. So for the audience, like we did in the last session as well, we'll open the question answer session 20 minutes prior to 7 o'clock. So around 6:40, we'll open the question answer session.
In between, suppose something comes, we can take, if they become this thing.
Sure,
we can actually, because sometimes we are not able to cover in the end. So we can actually, in between, we can, if you want, you can take, particularly with reference to what we are discussing.
Fair enough, sir. Fair enough. Thank you so much. So how I planned the session, sir, was we had some of the queries that came to us from some of the doctors, from some of our channel partners, from people who are apprehensive about as in how the sleep medicine will take shape in coming days after COVID, and what could be the best practices currently. So I'll just start with the first question that I had. First was more of a general question on sleep. So like you already mentioned, a lot of us are now working from home. We have a different lifestyle. There is less physical activity. We are behind the desks, computers all throughout the day. How does that affect our sleep in a general population?
See, sleep as a whole, you know, is a very important component of our life. We spend 1/3 of our lifespan. Itself indicate how essential and important the sleep is with us. Sleep, you can say adequate sleep, sufficient sleep, good quality sleep for at least 7.5 to 8 hours is required for the maintenance of our physical health, mental health, as well as emotional health. And sleep is affected by a lot of factors. It is affected by psychological factor. We know that sleep is a window of our mind. So any anxiety, stress, depression, then as you mentioned rightly, physical activity, exposure to sunlight is very important to maintain our circadian rhythm, and and then consuming a lot of stimulants, particularly tea, coffee, or smoking, which may happen more during this period of time when we are at home and this thing. So you have to be physically tired, mentally tired to get a good quality sleep. So that way, if you see how sleep is important in this time, COVID time, you'll see there are a lot of things which you mentioned, which are present now, in the sense that we have a lot of anxiety, tension, because we are going through a very uncertain phase. We don't know what is going to happen tomorrow. People are, having fear of disease, layoffs, financial problems, social isolation, and 24-hour stressful news channels, and so much time you are spending on these internet, on these blue light emitting devices like your laptop, your mobile phones, and this thing. So all of them, actually suppress your melatonin and in a way kind of kill your circadian rhythm. So that way, it's very, very important that we have to have a very good sleep pattern, and sleep is also very, very important for maintaining our immune function. So this is.
I was just coming to that aspect only. Said when you mentioned that how important it is to maintain the good quality and quantity of sleep during these stressful times, especially when we are uncertain about certain things that are happening around us and around the world. So we have enough data to say that good sleep is important for immunity. So what could a few people do about it and improve their immunity with sleep, with respect to sleep?
See, this is a very, very important point, although maybe it is a little away from the main title of the topic, but it's very important to understand, we should have a very good sleep for optimal functioning of immune function. In fact, sleep is a natural immune booster. That's what we call it. And if you see that if you have good sleep, it actually activates our T lymphocytes, which are very, very essential and important cells for developing adaptive immunity, so that our ability to fight bacteria and viruses is enhanced. It has been said that if you have 4 cycles of sleep, it results into the release of cytokines, which actually not only stimulate T lymphocytes, but it also increases the response time, not increases, decreases the response time of our immune cells to actually deal with these various types of infection. In fact, there was one study which was conducted in California, where they found that if how poor sleep, poor sleep in fact was the most important risk factor. If a person is exposed to, say, cold virus, so who are the one who are going to develop disease would depend on your poor quality of sleep. So what I mean to say is that preserving sleep during the COVID time is a very, very important thing to keep our immune system active, optimal, so that in case we catch this infection, we should be able to deal with it very properly.
Very interesting, sir. Very interesting. I think that's a very important point, because that sleep basically provides them the overall health and the strength basically also to fight these infections. So coming to the topic, and for especially, let's say, for CPAP patients. So I just wanted to start with the current scenario. Let's say if there are patients who are on sleep therapy. There could be 2 categories: one who are not infected and are completely safe from COVID, and second could be who might have either some contact or they might be actually suffering from. So what are the advices that these patients should take care of when they're using their existing CPAPs therapies?
So this is a very interesting question and difficult question to answer, because we know very little about it. In fact, what is the basis of this question is that when we had SARS-CoV-1, what we say this thing, there was a epidemic in Toronto. What happened? The large number of health professionals developed SARS. In fact, if you take the total number of patients which were there in Toronto, 50% were healthcare professionals.
Wow.
And when they analyzed that, they found that majority of them were involved in some kind of delivery of therapy, which was aerosol generating, like giving nebulizers, giving non-invasive ventilation, giving CPAP, or giving, say, high-flow nasal cannula therapy. So all these therapy which we consider to be, we'll talk about it, about how aerosol generation occurs subsequently for this thing. So from there, they realized that these healthcare professionals were actually delivering all these things, and although they observed the prescribed PPEs at that time, prescribed protocol for infection control, still they developed 50% developed infection of the total cases, and three healthcare professionals died. So that was actually the genesis, when you say, so this thing. So when we talk about now CPAP, is also considered to be a aerosol generating. You can ask me how it can generate aerosol, because when we breathe, there is a moisture. Because when you breathe in, our air is heated and humidified. So when you breathe out, that humidification is there, And when that humidified air comes out, if you cough, so you create what you call as droplets. And these droplets are quite heavy and bigger, and they drop on the surfaces within 6 feet. But when, you breathe out through the CPAP, and air is coming out through that exit point. Those holes are there, which is a fixed resistor. It is called intentionally. So when this air blows, the droplets which come, and the fluid, the water in that droplet is evaporated by this air of the CPAP or other NIV devices. And with the result, these droplets are converted into droplet nuclei.
Yes.
So these are very smaller particles, and they start floating in the air and go very far off, and becomes a risk for infection for this thing. So now your question comes, because it's very important to understand the background of a case before we actually go into this thing. Now somebody who is not suffering from COVID is using CPAP. There is no question. We say, okay, continue to use it. There is no problem. But the thing is that what we have come to know regarding the epidemiology of COVID is that the large percentage of cases are asymptomatic, and they are throwing these virus into the air. And this is much more so in children. Although the children, the number of children using CPAP, at least in India, or NIV in India, is much less than probably in other countries, because children actually have a much milder disease, and they are actually the super spreader, what you are trying to say. So if suppose somebody has no symptoms, you cannot say that that person does not have COVID, number one. So even if you say, okay, I want to test everybody, and if somebody asks me that CPAP is safe for me or not, so you go and get a test. So if you do a test, and suppose this test comes out to be negative, what does it mean? Because we know now there is a 30% false negative. Sensitivity is 70%, so 30% false. Now, what is this 30% number? If suppose the background prevalence is very high, then this 30% also becomes very high.
Yes.
So even with the negative test, you cannot be sure that that particular person is not asymptomatic carrier of the disease and is not throwing out viruses for this. So in a situation like that, now the question comes, should we advise our patients to stop using CPAP during this period of time? Now, you have to look into benefits of living or harms of living. That's what. Why you are trying to tell this patient not to use CPAP? Because you don't want other members of the family to get infected. So you have to see in that case that where is he living, how many people are there in the house, whether he has a separate room to himself, how many elderly people are there. If there are elderly people with a lot of comorbidities who are at a much higher risk of developing serious forms of disease, if that kind of a situation is there, then you have to calculate that risk. Second thing is that you say that this patient is anyway is asymptomatic carrier. So even if he is not using, also he is throwing. So how much is the contribution of the CPAP, which at night he will use, will add to the risk, because it is not that during the daytime when he is not using, he is not throwing.
Spread the infection. Absolutely. So what can be attributed to the CPAP and what can not be attributed? It will be very challenging to find out.
Yeah, it's a very very difficult question to answer. So what if you ask me, or for this thing, what I do, or what many people do, is that first of all you do the risk stratification, in the sense that if you suppose stop CPAP in that person, what problem this patient is going to have. So that would depend upon how severe is the disease,
Yes.
whether his sleep apnea is mild, moderate, or severe, and then how many comorbidities he has got. Suppose he also has severe diabetes, hypertension, he also has congestive heart failure. So these patients are very delicately balanced. CPAP helps in control of congestive failure, also control of hypertension. Now, we were talking about sleep, in the first topic. When we said that during this COVID time, we are likely to have disturbed sleep. And when you have sleep deprivation, because of this, you are busy 24 hours seeing news, seeing all these things. So during this period, you have more sleep deprivation. And if you have more sleep deprivation, your chronic diseases will not be under control. That means your diabetes will not be under control, your hypertension will not be under control. So these are the features of sleep deprivation. So already these comorbidities are there. And if you now remove CPAP also, so CPAP is also going to create sleep disruption because you give CPAP to improve sleep quality. So these patients may decompensate. So if patient has a mild disease, no comorbidities, you can advise him. He can very easily, sustain this non-use of CPAP. He may do well. He may not have this thing. But if it is a severe disease, if he is likely to decompensate, in that case, you may have to consider if you stop, then you have risk of his other chronic diseases decompensating. So yeah.
And also, sir, just a very interesting point. And also, what we know from the COVID epidemiology is people who have these comorbidities are actually at a higher risk of, let's say, the mortality as well and being infected as well. And these, so not using CPAP might actually contribute to them getting that disease as well, or probably having a worse prognosis as well.
Yeah, we just mentioned that sleep is good for immune system. So if you withdraw CPAP, the sleep will be disrupted. Already poor sleep will become poorer. So their immune system will be affected and they are more likely to develop more serious form of disease. And at the same time, with sleep disruption, their chronic diseases like hypertension, diabetes will also become worse. So what should we do under these circumstances? First, what we can do is, suppose you decide to withdraw. In that case, we'll have to go in for mitigation strategies. So what we mean by mitigation strategy is that we try to decrease the severity of sleep apnea. That we can do by, say, position therapy.
Yes.
We can advise them not to use alcohol, sedatives. Nasal congestion can be this thing. You can tell them to sleep with 2-3 pillows like that, you can do that. Or you can also consider giving some orodental device for the time being. These kinds of things, appliance you can consider and giving this, because this is going to be a little longer period. We don't know for how long this has to be done. Yes. And then you also refer this patient for better control of blood pressure, better control of ischemic heart diseases. So these mitigation things, you have to try. Now, if suppose after trying this mitigation, still, these things you are not able to do that, then you may have to take a decision that I cannot withdraw CPAP from my patients. So you allow them to continue with CPAP. So when you allow them to continue with CPAP, the next question then comes, how to decrease the risk of infection to the family members.
So when people are using this CPAP, when people are using this CPAP, I think the fears that we mentioned, so one of the aspects would be how to take care of the family. Like you mentioned, if somebody has elder parents at home or elderly at home, what kind of precautions should the family members take, let's say in this case scenario?
See, now we have decided that we are giving this person CPAP.
Yes.
And we presume that he is a potential case of COVID. If not a symptomatic case, but a suspect or an asymptomatic case of this thing. And we have to behave in that way, this thing. So what we can do is, then we can tell this person to sleep in a separate room,
right,
with a separate bathroom to himself. Now that kind of luxury, I don't know how many patients. I think a person who's using CPAP, maybe many of them.
Yes.
So that we can decrease the risk to the bed partner. So this person should go in isolation. Maybe he can go to the basement of the house or some other room of the house. It is like isolating this person completely.
Yes.
The other thing is that in the morning you will say there will be so much of aerosol and room and this thing. So you can put say exhaust fan
Yes.
in the room. You can use these air purifiers.
Air
You know,
purifier.
the Philips air purifier. You know, you people have, so many other people have. So that have HEPA filters.
Fair enough.
So these are, because ideally these people will be in a negative pressure rooms. But if negative pressure room is not available, what is the best alternative we can have? The best alternative we can have is we can give them a exhaust fan, or we can put these kinds of air filters, purifiers, and the cleanliness of the room has to be done very meticulously on a daily basis, of the bed sheets, pillow covers, because, some kind of fomites, which are all surfaces, because these aerosols will there and they will stay. So extensive cleaning of the room and this thing, that kind of a thing is there. So I think like you treat a case of mild COVID at home, this person will be on long-term basis at home like that.
We'll have to take all those precautions for a longer period of time for these patients.
Yeah, so that's, I think we can mitigate the risk to the family members.
Absolutely.
That is what we can do.
Very, very interesting, sir. Very interesting. And I'll probably, in the subsequent questions, I'll also come to the disinfectant of the device per se. But coming to the diagnostic part, sir, we also understand, like, I think I also read it in some of the guidelines you had also shared as well, that some of these studies might not be considered as emergency for a patient to come to hospital. Let's say in a current scenario, in a current COVID scenario, they might not be coming to the hospital purely for a sleep study. But what could be some cases in which this can, or conditions or comorbidities in which a patient might actually need a in-lab sleep study in this scenario, even in COVID scenario, that he has to come? What could be such certain conditions like that?
See, there are clear-cut guidelines from American Academy of Sleep Medicine and other reputed sleep bodies as far as the indications of in-lab studies as well as the out-of-lab or home sleep studies are concerned. And we know very clearly that patients who have got moderate to severe disease with a lot of comorbidities like chronic respiratory disease, or if they are having congestive heart failure, ischemic heart disease, obesity. So these patients should ideally be evaluated in the confines of a in-lab, sleep laboratory under the supervision of a trained sleep technologist. So that kind of, indications are there. And if we will try to bypass these indications and try to evaluate these patients on, or say, home sleep monitors, that probably may not be correct in true sense in terms of evaluation. And because home sleep devices are not actually validated for these kinds of studies. So if suppose you can postpone these cases for some time, you can do that. If that is possible, you do that. Otherwise, if you think that there is an emergency. Now, what do I mean by emergency here? What is a sleep emergency, particularly with severe sleep apnea? What we understand by that sleep emergency, we understand is that if the patient has a severe disease and patient has, severe sleepiness, and say now there is no complete lockdown, this person has to go out, and suppose he has to drive his own vehicle, or he's a professional driver, or this thing. So there is a definitely, risk of accidents, So other job-related safety issues may be there, if not driving. Then there can be falls in older people.
Right.
Those issues are there. And then, if these patients have unstable cardiovascular diseases, so they come with decompensated cardiac failure. So who may require this thing? So if these are the patients, you are the best judge, because in routine scenario, you will be evaluating these patients on an urgent basis and trying to treat them, And now taking into account this new scenario with the COVID epidemic and risk of transmission of infection, now you will have to, do the risk-benefit analysis. And there is no clear-cut guideline. You have to take each case, on an individual basis or case-by-case basis. You have to take decisions and you decide that. So if you feel that this patient has to be taken in lab, and then you have to do it, because in lockdown, of course, it may not be possible to do it unless there is some skeletal services are still there for this thing. This is a unprecedented situation, difficult situation, never thought of situations, and we are learning every day, trying to evolve and think about how to manage these cases. But definitely, I would say that these are the patients who should be evaluated on the in-lab basis, and then on that we have to then take the necessary steps for that, which we can discuss.
Very rightly said, sir. I think, sir, like you said, I think it will be a clinician's decision to evaluate and do the risk-benefit ratio and do it on a case-to-case basis. If there is a person, like you mentioned, of the history of, let's say, driving accidents or a congestive heart failure, decompensated congestive heart failure, these are the cases that the clinician like you might have to decide on a day-to-day and a case-to-case basis. So let's say if there is a person now who's come to an in-lab study and we've decided to go ahead with a in-lab sleep study with him. So what kind of precautions should the technicians, so the sleep staff, person who are conducting the study or might be involved with the titration, let's say once this case becomes positive, what are certain precautions and recommendations for the staff then?
Yeah, this is actually going to be happening soon. I think once partial or complete lockdown goes away, but the infection is not going to go away.
Absolutely.
This infection is going to stay for a fairly long period of time, at least for a year, till we have an effective medicine or effective vaccine. The virus is going to be there, and once the lockdown conditions are relaxed, so we are going to have these patients in the laboratory, and we have to be prepared, for that situation. That suppose or once we are going to have this patient, what precautions we have to take to prevent the transmission of disease and to protect not only our healthcare staff, our sleep technologists and other workers, but also these patients, who are coming and not actually suffering. They should not carry infection for this thing. So in a scenario like this, once we have during this period, even after lockdown, but till the epidemic is over, we have to take all the necessary precautions, and this precaution has to be on the recommendation of the national bodies, national infection control bodies, like we have NCDC here, like CDC, Center for Disease Control in US. Yes. So we have to be constantly, updated.
Yes, sir.
With those guidelines, that how we have to take into account the infection control measures, and you have to once you have these patients for sleep study, that there are two risks. One is that what infection control measure you are prescribing is, one is social distancing, hand hygiene, and the cuff etiquettes. These are the three major things. And when you have to apply electrodes, your technologies has to come very close. So you can't have social distancing in true sense with the patient, because you can't apply those electrodes 2 meters away from this thing. So your technologies has to go close to the patient. So he should wear all the necessary PPEs. But PPEs means he has to use a N95. This thing, if not N95, at least when he is applying this, he should use a surgical mask. N95 will become relevant once this patient is put on CPAP for titration.
Because when the titration more than the diagnostic.
Yeah. So at least at that time, he should be wearing goggles and his suit and a surgical mask and a cap, and then gloves, basic things, so that when he is applying this thing. So one thing more, normally most of the people are doing split night studies these days. And in the middle of night, as per the guideline, once you have recorded sufficient amount of the disease for documentation, that your patient has got severe disease and he can be taken up for split night study after 2 hours. So then the technologies goes in and puts the mask and switch on this thing. So what I feel is that this mask adaptation can be done in the beginning itself. So this patient can be called early for the sleep study, You can look for what kind of mask is suitable for him. All trial has to be given, and patient should be trained enough that he can put the mask himself. So that in the night, the another thing, very important thing which I mentioned, that technician should not sit in the same room. Normally, sometimes, technician, the computer is in the lab itself. So you have to have a separate cabin, control room, where the technician is going to sit and which is completely isolated. The sleep lab has to be single, patient is there, door is closed, and then you have to have some kind of negative system. So you may have to put maybe a what you call exhaust fan, and your AC should have HEPA filter, or you put again a air purifier with HEPA filter. And during the night, you should have a good communication system with the patient, which you normally also have it. So in the night, you can actually wake up the patient and tell the patient to wear the mask himself. Only the technology should go only if the patient is not able to do it, and the machine should be switched off once the technology has come out, and then he does once then he can do the titration. So in the morning, after the titration, the exhaust fan should be there, the air should be completely evacuated, and there should be only one source of air exit, and that should actually go into the environment. It should not go into parking, or it should not go into some areas of the lab or hospital if the lab is there. It should go into the environment totally in a way that it is not going to mix.
With the isolation room, the exhaust should actually lead to an isolated place rather than any generic area.
Yes.
Sir, another aspect of the same question would be, one aspect is the technician taking the training, and like you mentioned, all these universal precautions that will probably hopefully come up with the guidelines, and we'll keep updated, we'll keep sharing that with our audience as well. The second aspect would be the disinfectant of the equipment itself, the device, the CPAP, the titration devices. Some patients just connect to the first question, some patient might want to know how to clean their devices at home as well. So what could be the advice for them?
See, first of all, you should use a separate mask for every patient.
Yes.
Anyway, if the patient has to buy the equipment, he can carry the same mask with him. The sleep labs should not reuse the mask after cleaning or sterilizing. For every patient, you have to use a new dedicated mask for the patient. And then cleaning as such, is important not only in the sleep lab, but also for the patients who are using at home for this. So I think that should be as per the recommendation of the manufacturer. As far as the cleaning part is concerned, we have usually what is called a daily cleaning, which you do for the what you call that. You put that seal on the mask. You have a mask body, and then you have those what you call those
airtight seal, the airtight seal that is
which is removable.
Yes, the airtight seal,
which needs to be cleaned with soap and water every day, because it's very important. Because when you put this mask on your face has a lot of oil.
Yes.
And also dead skin.
Yes.
So this oil actually makes the mask much softer for this thing. So the seal becomes difficult. So that's a everyday, and it also can actually have bacteria and viruses for this thing. So daily you can clean with the soap and water. That part is there. Then you have weekly cleaning. You do it with the mask, body, headgear. You do the tubings, and you also remove change the filter every month. These are the usual things. Now the question comes whether we have to enhance it or not.
So, sir, just to add to that, we have got these guidelines. Let's say, as Philips, as manufacturers, we have got these guidelines for COVID specifically, and we'll be very happy to share it with all the audience after the webinar. We'll get the links.
Now, why don't you share some highlights if you have gone through them?
So, sir, they have actually, they're very generic, and like some of the things you mentioned, they have brought it to a daily cleaning kind of a concept. They've mentioned the solutions that you can use in a hospital setup and an in-lab setup. So they've clearly mentioned how to clean your device, how to clean this diagnostic device, how to clean the CPAP, and how to clean the mask. So there are clear-cut guidelines for that, and we'll be very happy to share that. So another aspect of the titration, if I might just ask one very brief comment from you, is would this change the let's say, or increase the aspect of auto titration if you don't want to bring the patient to a hospital again? Would that affect in terms of getting more patients to do auto titration at home kind of a scenario?
See, auto titration is an integral component of home sleep testing.
Yes.
So if you are doing home sleep testing and you find significant obstructive sleep apnea disease, you have to do auto titration, because you cannot now take them to the in-lab for titration.
Absolutely.
But if you are doing an in-lab, then you will do in-lab titration only, because doing separately auto titration has no meaning,
Yes.
So all those patients you are taking for home sleep testing should go in for auto titration as per the protocol. And we have seen that this works very well for and equally well as far as the symptom control is concerned, or as far as the compliance of the CPAP is concerned. It fairly fares well, with the in-lab titration, and that's what you can use for this thing. But you can't use auto titration for patient with comorbidities. Patient who has got COPD, obesity, hypoventilation syndrome, patient with congestive heart failure. So all these patients, who have significant comorbidities or who may also have simultaneously hypoventilation, these patients are not suitable for auto titration. So we can't say that we will take more patients from the group of in-lab testing into home sleep testing and doing the auto titration. So then, somewhere we are going to compromise the quality of care, and moreover, we don't know. These things have not been studied in those kinds of conditions, and we cannot blindly take up these cases for these kinds of methodology for evaluation as well as titration, CPAP titration.
I think, sir, you also had said earlier, I think probably one of the things that will change and improve is if there is a condition where you don't want to keep the patient in hospital for 2 days, probably, like you mentioned, split studies might be a very good option for these patients. So you do the diagnosis in the first half and then the titration in the same night, because the patient is already in the hospital and you've already taken all the precautions for these patients. Sir, on that note, since we've already touched it, if I go forward and now I want to talk about some of the scenarios that how it might change for us going forward, let's say in the coming months, or let's say a post-COVID, we don't know when it will actually be a post-COVID. Like you mentioned, the disease is here to stay for some time, at least in some bits and pieces. So what could be the scenario, let's say for the HSTs in this case, the home sleep testing? What could be some different scenarios that might come up for the home sleep testing then?
See, home sleep testing is done in different ways, even now. One method is that the technician goes to the patient's home and applies the electrodes and set up the machine, and then goes home, and in the morning he comes and picks up the machine, and that's one way. Second thing is the technician stays at the patient's home, and some people are even with the laptop trying to do some kind of titration also. They are doing, but although it is not recommended. That's the second thing. Third thing is that the patient comes to the sleep center, takes the machine home, where you teach the patient how to apply and this thing. They go home and then they bring back the machine to this thing, So these are the different ways at present sleep studies home sleep studies are being done. But now I think with this present epidemic, it will be very difficult for the sleep technologists to go home. First of all, the centers will not like to send them from the safety point of view, from the infection transmission point of view, and even the patient's family and this thing, they may also not like to have a stranger coming to their home and doing this thing. So, and at the same time, we would not like in the sleep center, we would not like patients to come to sleep center, because ultimately the whole purpose is social distancing and not allowing people to come and transmit infection. So we would also not like to the patients to come and take the machine and this thing. So the only option is that some way you have to drop the machine. Drop, like you drop in their garage or drop into their designated area of the house from which the patient will pick up. And then, you can have 3 methods by which you can teach the patient how to use that home sleep testing. You can do a telemedicine, You can through that teach them how to put various things. You can send a video, or through telemedicine you can send a video. You can give written instructions to how to apply all these things, you know. And then uh, 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 as I said, telemedicine, and third is through the videos. So these are the ways things may little bit change, and a patient will apply, and then after that, you know, they may put it back into that garage. Somebody will go and pick it up, and then once it is brought, though there is no patient to patient contact, person to person, let me say like that, person to person contact. But the question is, through machine, the infection can still travel. So how are we going to carry this machine, which could be potentially infected with the virus? So, and how we are going to sanitize it? So there are little different recommendation on the basis of the information that you can keep this machine for 72 hours lying, you know, in the lab without touching it, so that, because we know that the virus will get deactivated within that period of time, and then clean it with the usual antiseptic swabs, or just with the simple, I mean, simple towel and those things. You do it, and then you can. Now, the other thing which is coming up now recently is what is called disposable equipments.
Yes, sir. I was just coming to that.
This is a new, this thing is there. So these disposable kind of sleep labs will be coming. So the patient will use and throw, and you will collect the data through, you know, remotely by electronic means. So you are not having any, yeah.
Just one aspect of that, and I think we briefly touched upon this as well. When we see these patients, let's say, not allowing that movement of in and out of the hospital, and a very frequent movement, only come for emergencies, what kind of a role do you see telemedicine playing in this kind of scenario? Let's say patient who doesn't have comorbidities, but we know is symptomatic, and we can do a HST. How can telemedicine be useful for these patients?
So this is a new phenomena, you know, which we never thought of. In fact, telemedicine was not legal in our country. Yes. It is only now the Medical Council of India, and they have issued some guidelines, and I think probably they are for only COVID period. Whether they will continue beyond that, I don't know. But definitely, you know, since we have never practiced telemedicine so far, we don't have that kind of confidence, neither as doctors or nor the patients, you know, have. In fact, we are more used to direct face-to-face contact, talking to patients, and trying to understand from the patient's actions and from the reactions, you know, that. So we have been trained in that kind of art and this thing. And many patients also don't, you know, like to consult. They want to visit the doctor personally. But now we have been doing this telemedicine for last 1 month, and it's a new experience. And frankly speaking, you know, when I started doing it, I was a little skeptical, and I was just thinking whether it will work in the same way as you know, what we
physically seeing those patients.
And then I went into the literature, and also if you go into the site of American Academy of Sleep Medicine, there is one, you know, column there is telemedicine. And I went through a few studies, you know, and to my surprise, these studies, there are a lot of 3-4 good studies have been done, and which shows, you know, equal efficacy in terms of, you know, delivery of care to the patient, you know, and patient satisfaction, treatment outcomes, and they are found to be quite equivalent for this thing. And my very little experience, what I have, we are doing it through either video call or through Skype. You can do these two methods which you use. So, you know, even you can, you know, I work in a little different way. I work in a group kind of a practice. I have junior consultants with me. They all see the case first, prepare the case, and then they come to me with the patient and this thing and present and do this thing. Now suddenly, you know, now I feel if I have to see my patient directly, so now I take my consultant also. So the patient is first, you know, called by the consultant, he sees, then he takes me into the picture, and then we all three, you know, discuss. And I think it's doing fairly well, I must say. But this thing, at least for this thing. So what I mean to say is that instead of not seeing your patient, seeing through telemedicine, at least follow up. In the first time when you're seeing the patient, there is a problem. But in the follow-up, a lot of patients, I think, can be effectively and quite satisfactorily, they can be seen, and you can have, but the only thing is we need to have a much better platform through which, you can have those images, investigations, and how to store data. So the telemedicine is much more than, talking to the patient. It is a consultation, then billing part is there, and sending the prescriptions, storing data, security of the data, privacy of the data. So there are issues, writing medicines. So all these things are there. I think we are evolving into this.
I think absolutely evolving is the word. I think as we go forward, there might be some guidelines coming for this. There might be some do's and don'ts definitely coming for this. And like you said, if the disease stays here for quite some time, we'll all have to think of new ways of working and new ways of evolving as well. I think that would be very interesting. So we have some questions now. I'll just pick some of them. We have touched upon some of them. I think one of the questions from one of the participants is they have asked about any specific instructions to changing the filters or using any additional viral filters. I'm assuming they're talking about a COVID positive patient who's on a CPAP, and they're asking if we need to have any other viral filters or any extra filters for these patients.
Very, very good question, I think, is asked. When you use a CPAP machine, there are two types of filters. One, you see that sponge kind of thing,
Yes.
Normally, we clean it every week. And then there is a paper-like filter, which is normally changed after 1 month. Once that become dirty or this thing, then you do that. So this filter now, first is you need to wash it frequently and dry it. So you remove it every second day with soap and water, clean it, dry it. You can dry it by, switching on the machine for 15 minutes. It gets dried, and put it back. And then there is a filter, white filter. Paper filter should not be washed because it is not meant to be washed like that. And that you can change maybe a little more frequently rather than every month. And now third thing which is coming is that, that's the problem of aerosolization, which we talked. And this aerosolization will occur on that holes level. So now what we feel that change which I feel which is likely to come, we are now not going to use the vented mask. So we'll have to use a non-vented mask. These holes, these what you call as fixed resistor, the fixed leak. So, and then you put another exit port between mask and the tubing. So there, many people are now developing a kind of a HEPA filter.
Absolutely.
Which can be put on that, and then the air will exit. So through that, with the virus getting, trapped into that, and then you have to change that. So these kinds of things have already started coming.
Absolutely. So, sir,
how good they will be.
Sorry, sir. Please complete.
So I was just saying that these things are coming, and many companies are coming up with these innovative ideas, and you can actually put instead of this holes vented mask, you take a non-vented mask, put an extra exit port, and that exit port should have a facility of a additional filter, like you have filter in the ventilator. At the expiratory port of the ventilator, when you have double tubing, in the double tubing you will have at the expiratory port a HEPA filter, where the bacteria and the virus can be filtered out. So these kinds of, I think, filters may come soon, and new developments. I think you being from the Philips, you can talk to your engineering team whether something like that is going on.
So that's exactly what I was telling. So, sir, we are actually having a device right now which should be coming very soon, and that's purely developed for COVID. It's called as a E30 ventilator, which will have a CPAP mode and an IV mode and invasive capabilities as well. And we've actually used the circuit that we are trying to provide is actually a non-vented mask circuit, like completely you said, with these filters at the exhalatory port. So that's what we are coming, and very soon we'll have it in India. And I think the team will reach out to all of you to show the device as well. There are a couple of questions which I think are purely for me, as they want those guidelines from Philips. So we'll definitely make sure that everybody receives that after the call by tomorrow. We will ensure that. Sir, there is a very interesting question which just has come now. I think I've just lost it. Give me a second. So this was regarding I think this is where we started the discussion, like with the work from home, children not going to school. a lot of people have now not got a very routine sleep time. So their sleep pattern has really changed. So how to do studies in these people now?
No, this is interesting. How I
This is
hope during
definitely a
this
very
period,
interesting question.
I hope during this period when they are under lockdown, probably we may not get these questions for home sleep studies. All the non-essential and non-emergent sleep studies are practically stopped and they are not being done. And I'm sure once these people go back to their work and go back to their routine, this sleep pattern should return. But this definitely raises a question that we should, those people who are working from home, they should not be working from bed. That's very
Right.
important, and
Very rightly said.
they should, these people should be advised to follow a routine the way they have been doing it when they were going to the office. The same thing they should replicate at their homes. They should maintain their schedule, their wake up time, their sleep time, their meals time, type of meals they are eating. All that should be constant, because if your these wake time sleep times are constant, that gives good feedback to the body that our all other metabolic functions also, they remain in order and and are working properly, because your metabolic processes, which are, this is control of sugar, control of blood pressure, and all other hormonal activities. So if you keep that schedule of sleep, wake, meals, those things also remain within, that circadian pattern, and whole our body system works very well. So it's very important that we follow these things. We have regular exercises. We must expose ourselves to plenty of sunshine. But this thing, we should have relaxing activities, reading, writing, talking to people and family members, contact, this thing. We should not consume a lot of tea, coffee, or smoking, alcohol, those things, and particularly we should avoid using too much of these laptops, the phones, and this thing. And practically, I would say 3 hours before sleep, you should develop quarantine from these items. Your phone, your laptop, the TV, and this thing, you do develop quarantine and go into some kind of, relaxing schedule. Have a warm bath, timely food, listening to music. All these things, basically gives you a kind of a relaxed mind, so that you are ready to go to bed and have a good night's sleep.
Yeah, so one of the questions that I've got now, I think from one of the doctors, is about the use of helmets. So when I said the model that we are having, we also have a circuit in that which connects to the helmet, because that again has an axillary pole where you can put a filter and prevent the aerosolizations. But what in my association with sleep for last 7 years now, I really haven't seen a lot of use of helmet. So any comments on that, sir, please?
See, helmet is basically developed for longer, NIV. It was developed because CPAP, you are using it intermittently for sleep apnea. You use it only during sleep, and during the daytime, you're not using it. So the pressure by the interface is not there continuously, and you get relief on the pressure marks. But when you're giving NIV or CPAP for acute conditions like congestive heart failure, acute exacerbation of COPD, or milder forms of pneumonias and other immunocompromised host, and all those conditions, there, you have to apply these modalities, non-invasive modalities, whether it is CPAP or BiPAP, on a continuous basis for a few days, And when you put the interface continuously day and night, do you develop those pressure sores? Like bed sores, you develop these pressure sores. So that's why we say we use non-invasive ventilation only for conditions which are rapidly reversible, so that you don't have to give it for more than 24 to 48 hours. So as you extend the indications for non-invasive ventilation, then your interface will become a limiting factor. You will develop those pressure point sores, and you won't be able to use it. So to provide relief from pressure on the nose, on this thing, you develop total face mask. Then the total face mask, there was problem of leakage and other thing. So the helmet came. So helmet is basically, you have a collar-like thing. So you have a total pressure relief from all these areas. So idea was to extend the duration of providing these modalities so that we can prevent invasive ventilation for as long as possible. And we have seen that helmet so far has not been very successful for NIV because it causes a lot of noise and deafness and dead space and deafness. So it is very good modality for providing CPAP for say patient with acute pulmonary edema or post-operative patients and this thing. So those are situations, And the other thing which I want to say that when you want to give helmet, you'll have to change the what you call ventilator settings. So you have to put a higher EPAP so that you can wash out that increased dead space. So when you will have to put higher EPAP, your flow rates have to be higher.
Yes.
And when your flow rates become higher, your aerosolization becomes much more.
Yes.
So that way, the risk for that also increases, for aerosolization, and these are the things. So there has been some studies to see that which are the interfaces which cause maximum aerosolization. So it was seen that if you use those nasal, what you call these seals, the nasal seal, or what you call these.
I'm not remembering the name, but I understand those.
The nasal, these seals
nasal
and
aids that they use for
those kinds of interfaces. They causes much more aerosolization than is a stable nasal mask or oronasal mask.
Fair enough. So one of the questions, I think this is from outside India, and they specifically wanted to ask, I'm not sure whether the different countries like Dhaka, Bangladesh and us, we would have different guidelines, but they wanted to ask that do they need to check the COVID status before any level 1 study? If they're doing an in-lab study, they want to check the COVID status of all these patients?
Yeah, see, we have already touched upon this subject earlier, because, as long as this epidemic is there, then any patient who is coming for sleep study, you should take him as a potential or a suspect or a asymptomatic case of COVID. So then, the situation comes that can we, by doing this PCR test, we will be able to screen this patient. Even if you do PCR test, then as I said, that there is a 30% negative rate. And if the prevalence is very low, like towards that end of the pandemic, then of course you can think that probably your patient is not suffering from this disease. But if you are doing it in the middle of pandemic, when you have to see that the area in which you want to do the sleep study, what is the background prevalence of COVID-19 there, and if the background prevalence is fairly high, then even negative test does not rule out asymptomatic carrier state in this patient. So ultimately, you have no choice. If you want to do the sleep study, then you have to do it as if you think that your patient is a potential case of this thing, and absolutely, you have to have your sleep lab room with that negative pressure. If that negative pressure is not there, some kind of exhaust fan, the air filter, air purifier, and your technician has to take proper PPEs and proper precautions while doing these kinds of things. So you cannot be 100% sure. So I think it is better to take those precautions.
Sir, I'll just take 2 more questions, because I think we are in any case, it's always very interesting when people do keep asking questions. That's a very interactive and a good session. So I'll just take 2 more questions before I'll ask you to conclude. Yeah. So one is, one of the doctors has asked, any thoughts on the effect of increasing air resistance when you use, let's say, these bacterial filters with existing CPAP? So if the air resistance increases, how does that changes? And the second is probably on the similar line about using a humidifier with a CPAP or any of these devices in a COVID patients.
Okay, these are again very good questions, I must say. The first is, if you put an extra filter on the CPAP, then, the very fact is that when this is designed, even the HEPA filter you use this N95 mask when you use, you do feel, I'm sure anybody who has used N95 mask, he feels that there is some in the breathing,
Absolutely.
There is some, definitely it is there,
Absolutely.
But this has to be done in a bench study. When you are using these filters, and those companies who are developing these filters, they have to, when it is put and on the bench study, it has to be seen whether it is resulting into extra resistance, with the result that the EPAP increases or the CPAP goes up in these cases, and whether it requires any kind of retitration of the machine or resetting of the machine when you are this thing. That thing I don't know. I think this is a very interesting point. And once these filters are developed, these companies should, I think, give that information along with that. I think it is more a question for you, and you pass it on to your company engineers. And if they are developing such kinds of filters, they should do first the bench studies and to see that whether it results into any such things. And second thing is
the humidifiers.
Regarding the humidifiers, so humidifiers are a source of infection and also a source for aerosolization. Because how does aerosolization occurs? It is the expired breath, we have that moisture.
Absolutely.
So normally, if that moisture is coughed out, it is in the form of droplets, which are heavy particles and drop within 6 feet on the surfaces. But once the air is there coming out through that resistor, this air will evaporate that water. Once that air is evaporated, they becomes nuclei. So humidifier use can be, more conducive, I would say, to the development of more aerosolization, although it has to be seen. There is, I don't know whether there is any study to prove it, but one thing I would say, that if you want to use a humidifier because it causes dryness in a patient, then it must be maintained very well, in the sense that every day the humidifier has to be emptied, dried, and a fresh distilled water has to be put in on daily basis. And then you must do the cleaning of this humidifier on a weekly basis with the soap and water, the dish soap and water combination. And every 2 weeks you must sterilize with this way, using that vinegar. 1:5 vinegar and water combination you have to do. You can do it during this COVID period. You can do it maybe more frequently,
right,
to keep them as sterile as possible. So that's why I think this is a very important thing. And I feel, if I apply my basics, that what is aerosolization, what is droplet nuclear, why we should call CPAP as a aerosol generating, why we should call nebulizer as an aerosol generating equipment, why we should call BiPAP as a aerosol generating. So then in that case, it is ultimately, we have to see whether it should, or if there is too much of water in the expired air, then probably it will not be able to evaporate. Probably it will not form that much. So I think this has to be studied properly, and one has to look into if there is any such literature, particularly, from that Toronto study, where 50% of the patient developed disease, and they are used these kinds of devices in these things. So I think we need to know much more about this. It's a very, very interesting point, I think somebody has raised.
Sure. Sir, I think there's one about designing the PPE kits for patients and technicians. I'm assuming that's more of the PPE kits that are available right now, and so similar ones would be used. Then there are a few requests about the disinfectant, and I'll assure everyone that we'll just share this by tomorrow, and all the people will get the disinfectant guidelines from Philips. Just to conclude, sir, I was very interesting session, and we got some very interesting questions as well, some very intelligent questions as well. How would you like to conclude, as in what can we see as foreseeable changes in sleep practice, let's say going forward in 6 months, a year, just to conclude, sir?
See, it's going to change, I think, tremendously, significantly. People are now calling, we call it BCAD, that now there will be before corona and after corona period. So the practice of sleep medicine is going to change very significantly after this whole thing, because at least during this period of 1 year or 2 years, till things return to normal, now the way we are going to, even give appointment to our patients will change. We'll probably, if any patient wants to take appointment, we will send a questionnaire to them. You will do pre-screening. You will, before, rather than asking about their complaints, you will have additional component, whether you have symptoms related to COVID or not. Then you may have, you may like to see whether we should do home sleep testing, whether you really want this patient to come to the clinic, or you can through telemedicine. The screening for telemedicine versus clinic visit. So you may actually put in online questionnaires. You may put in online, the severity measurement questionnaire. So you tend to know from the this thing, like you put Berlin questionnaire and you see high probability, low probability. Then you may have questionnaire to tell you whether this patient have a mild disease, moderate disease, or severe disease, something like that. So that, you can see whether you really want to call this patient to the clinic or not, or you want to take him on a telemedicine, and then you want to send home sleep testing, something like that, and give him like that. And then, or you call him to the clinic. And once you decide that this patient should come to clinic on the basis of severity of diseases, or on the basis of the comorbidities this patient has got, then you may time them accordingly. You will see to it that at one particular time, lot of patients are not there. You are going to restrict the number of probably the attendants coming out with this thing. You may, even in your waiting area, you are going to bring changes. And then you will have a lot of, these are the general measures which will be probably there in any clinic. For that matter, you will have a lot of sanitizer in your clinic, which probably was never there before. So cleaning part, that part. But in the sleep lab, the things will come. Your technicians, you need to educate your staff, very well. You will have to see again your center has to, your staff sitting, distancing, so that there is no infection, because you don't want your staff people to fall sick. There will be periodic screening of your staff members, and the moment there is some symptoms, he has to be given leave for this thing. The sleep lab structure you may need to change. You may like to have something negative pressure, or you may like to put some kind of, so that aerosol is, your lab needs to be much more ventilated for this thing. Your technician room has to be secluded. You are not going to allow maybe the attendant in the sleep lab now, because you have to create a bed. So you have to see, if you are doing a female patient, do you want to keep a female attendant? So your staffing, your technologists, you will have to include more, some balance of female technologists and male technologists. All these things, the practice, when you are going to see, how you have this thing. So many things you are going to develop a lot of teaching modules. You are going to make a lot of videos to which you can, send to the patients, so your practice will be maybe 50% telemedicine, 50% of this thing, and maybe a year or 2 years. And then how, once these things become a routine, this may become a new norm. And things, there will be many things. The epidemic is not over. We are in the midst of it. We are learning new things. We will be learning newer information about its transmission. We will be developing newer devices. Maybe there may be change in the way we practice and therapeutic devices. Maybe there's some boost to orodental devices. We don't know. From some shift from CPAP to orodental. Maybe you are going into surgical methodology also, little more multimodality, and conservative means, weight management, avoiding of sedation. So what we feel that prioritization of various, modalities, working, specific measures, your technologies bearing PPs, all these things, are going to change at least for a year or more. These things will continue, because this virus is going to come. You never know. In fact, the risk is more when you are suspecting less.
Yes, when you lower your guard, then you're more.
So then you will be suddenly caught unaware. And you this thing. So you have to be in a constant state of vigilance, and you cannot, be off your guard. You have to maintain that highest level of your cleaning of your clinic, the intensity of clinic.
Basics, absolutely.
Intensity of clinic, surfaces, your the devices, you will have more disposable devices. now more of that than this thing. Your mask will be changed much more frequently. You are not going to use mask for 6 months or this thing. Maybe every 2 months, 3 months, your mask you will change. Your new accessories will come, for maintaining your machines, and your machines will be more infection control friendly from that angle. So I think things are going to change, and the major change will be, going online, and telemedicine, I think, and development of new portals, new ways of, how we can give the similar quality of care what we are giving, on that. So I think these are the things which I seeing, in near future, what is going to change.
Very interesting, sir. Like you said, probably we will evolve as the disease evolves and as those guidelines evolve. And like you mentioned earlier, I think a lot of decisions would also depend on the risk and benefit ratios of doing these things and case-based decisions. Thank you so much for your time, sir. It's always very, very enlightening for me to talk to you and learn so much. I've learned so much over the years. We had very good participation and they were very interesting questions. I hope everybody learned something that they were looking forward to. Thank you so much for your time, sir.
Thank you, Sushant. Thank you, Philips, for again, inviting me. It has been a wonderful experience with you, all of you. Thank you once again.
Thank you, sir. Please take care. Everyone, please take care. Bye, sir. Good night.